During a warm family reunion at her grandmother's house, Ilara notices something strange. Her husband, usually cheerful, suddenly freezes while staring at an old family photo. What did he see in that photo that shook him to his core? Before we dive into this chilling story, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a mystery like this. And tell us in the comments, which city are you watching from? It was just a regular family reunion. We were staying at my grandmother's house, a sprawling, slightly creaky Victorian nestled on a hill overlooking a sleepy coastal town. The air was thick with the scent of Grandma Eleanor's famous apple pie, mingled with the salty tang of the sea breeze. Laughter and chatter echoed through the high-ceilinged rooms, a comforting cacophony of cousins, aunts, and uncles, all gathered under one roof for our annual summer tradition. My husband Liam usually loved these gatherings. He was an only child, and the sheer volume of my extended family always seemed to fill a void in him. He'd spend hours playing board games with my younger cousins, listening intently to my uncle's outlandish fishing stories, or simply sitting on the porch swing with Grandma, soaking in the quiet wisdom she exuded. But this year, something felt off. He'd been unusually quiet, a subtle tension in his shoulders that I couldn't quite decipher. I'd attributed it to work stress, or perhaps just the exhaustion of the long drive. The evening was winding down. The younger kids were finally tucked into bed, their excited whispers gradually fading into contented snores. Adults lingered, nursing cups of tea or the last drops of wine, their conversations softening into more intimate tones. Liam had volunteered to fetch more drinks from the kitchen, a task usually reserved for the teenagers. I was curled up on the antique sofa in the living room, half listening to my aunt recount a hilarious anecdote about her cat, when a strange quiet descended from the kitchen. It wasn't the usual lull in conversation. It was an absence, a sudden heavy silence that prickled the hairs on my arms. Then I heard it. "Ilara?" His voice was a low murmur, barely audible over the hum of the old refrigerator, but it was laced with an urgency that made my stomach clench. It wasn't a question, more like a plea, a desperate whisper. I excused myself from the conversation, my aunt giving me a curious glance, and walked towards the kitchen. The light from the overhead fixture cast long, stark shadows. Liam stood by the far wall, his back to me, his hand raised, pointing at something. His shoulders, usually so broad and relaxed, were hunched, and I could see a tremor running through his arm. "Liam, are you all right?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. He didn't turn. His hand was still outstretched, pointing at an old framed photograph hanging amidst a cluttered gallery of family portraits. It was a black and white photo, faded with age, depicting a stern-faced man in a military uniform, his eyes piercing even through the sepia tones. He finally turned, his face pale, his eyes wide and unfocused, like he was seeing a ghost. His hand, still pointing, was visibly trembling now. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, hoarse with an emotion I couldn't place. I glanced at the photo, then back at him, confused by his intensity. "Oh, that's just Grandpa Arthur," I replied casually, a small smile playing on my lips. "My mom's dad. He passed away before you and I met, but everyone says I have his eyes." I even chuckled lightly, trying to diffuse the strange tension. His gaze, however, didn't soften. It intensified, boring into me, cold and distant. The smile vanished from my face. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't Liam. "We have to leave now," he said, his voice flat, devoid of any warmth. The words hung in the air, heavy and final, shattering the comfortable illusion of the family reunion. My mind reeled. "What? Liam, what are you talking about? We just got here. Everyone's still awake. Grandma would be so upset." He didn't respond to my protests. Instead, he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong, and pulled me towards the back door, away from the living room, away from the family. "Now, Ilara, we have to go, please." His eyes, usually so full of gentle humor, were filled with a raw, desperate fear I'd never seen before. I stumbled after him, my mind racing, trying to comprehend the sudden shift. He led me out into the cool night air, past the rose bushes Grandma tended so meticulously and towards our car parked discreetly at the side of the house. He fumbled with the keys, his hands still shaking, before finally unlocking the doors. Once inside, the engine purred to life, but he didn't immediately drive away. He gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, his gaze fixed on the darkened silhouette of Grandma's house. The silence in the car was deafening, broken only by the frantic pounding of my own heart. "Liam, you're scaring me," I finally managed, my voice trembling. "What is going on? What about Grandpa Arthur?" He took a deep, shuddering breath, then another. His eyes were still fixed on the house, but I could see a distant, haunted look in them. "That man," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "That man in the photo. He killed my family." The words hit me like a physical blow. My breath hitched. "What? Number Liam, that's impossible. Grandpa Arthur he was a war hero, a kind, quiet man. Everyone loved him." Disbelief warred with a creeping dread. This was insane. He finally turned to me, his eyes brimming with unshed tears, a pain so profound that it twisted my gut. "I know it sounds impossible. I know it sounds crazy. But I remember him, Alara. I remember his eyes, the way he moved, the way he smiled." He shuddered. "I was 5 years old. It was late. My parents had friends over. There was a lot of noise, laughter, then screams, and then silence." He paused, struggling to breathe, his chest heaving. I hid under my bed. I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps. And then I saw him, just for a second. He was standing in the doorway of my room. He looked around, then his eyes landed on my bed. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying he wouldn't see me. He didn't. He just smiled, a cold, empty smile, and then he left. My mind raced, trying to process his words, to reconcile them with the image of the loving grandfather my family always spoke of. But how? Why would he be there? Who were these friends? Was it a robbery? I stammered, desperate for a logical explanation. "It wasn't a robbery," Liam said, his voice flat. "Nothing was taken. The police were baffled. They called it a home invasion gone wrong, but there were no signs of forced entry. No witnesses, just a massacre. My parents, my aunt and uncle who were visiting, all gone." He swallowed hard. "I was found the next morning by a neighbor. I was in shock. I couldn't speak for weeks. They said I had repressed the memory, that it was trauma." "But you remember him?" I asked, a chill creeping up my spine. "Flashes," he whispered. "Nightmares. Always the same face, the same eyes, the same cold smile. I've been in therapy for years, trying to piece it together. My therapist said it was a coping mechanism, that my mind was creating a villain to explain the inexplicable. But when I saw that photo, it wasn't a creation. It was him." He gestured vaguely back at the house. "I saw the photo when I was getting a drink. It was hanging there, just like any other family photo. But the moment my eyes landed on him, it was like a dam broke. Every fragmented memory, every nightmare, every repressed image flooded back. The uniform, the way he held himself. It's him, Alara. It's the man who murdered my family." My world tilted on its axis. My grandfather, a murderer. The man my mother adored, the patriarch of our family, a killer. It was an unthinkable, monstrous accusation. But the raw terror in Liam's eyes, the conviction in his voice, was chillingly real. "But why? Why would he do something like that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Liam shook his head, a haunted look in his eyes. "I don't know. That's the part I've never been able to figure out. There was no connection. My parents were ordinary people. They didn't have enemies. They weren't involved in anything suspicious. It was random, or so I thought. A new, horrifying thought struck me. Does Grandma know? He flinched, as if the question physically pained him. I don't know. How could she not? How could she live with him, love him, if he was capable of something like that? He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes squeezed shut. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe he was a monster hiding in plain sight. The idea of my sweet, gentle Grandma Eleanor, complicit in such a heinous crime, was unfathomable. But the alternative, that she had lived a lie, married a killer, and never known, was equally terrifying. "We can't just leave without saying anything," I argued, though my voice lacked conviction. The thought of facing Grandma, of looking into her kind, wrinkled face and knowing this terrible secret, made me feel sick. "We can't stay," Liam countered, his voice firm. "Not another minute. My memories are still hazy, but the fear is real. I can't be in the same house as his ghost, not when he's looking at me from the wall." He gestured towards the house again. "And what if there's more? What if there's a reason he was there, a connection we don't know about?" He started the car, the engine rumbling to life. "We'll pack our bags quickly. Tell them we got an urgent call, a family emergency back home. Anything. Just get us out of here." The drive back to the house felt surreal. The laughter and chatter that had filled the air moments ago now seemed like a cruel mockery. We slipped back inside, trying to appear calm, but every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every creak of the old house a whisper of the past. I found my duffel bag, my hands fumbling with the zipper. Liam was already stuffing his clothes into his own bag, his movements jerky and hurried. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: shock, disbelief, a profound sense of betrayal, and a growing, icy fear. My grandfather, a murderer. It was a truth too monstrous to bear. As I zipped up my bag, my eyes fell on the photo again, the one Liam had pointed to. Grandpa Arthur. His eyes, usually so comforting in my memories, now seemed to hold a chilling blankness, a depth I had never noticed. Was it just Liam's trauma, projecting his fear onto an innocent man? Or was there a dark truth lurking beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect family history? We managed to make our excuses, mumbling something about a sudden illness back home, our voices strained, our eyes avoiding contact. Grandma Eleanor, ever the empathetic matriarch, fussed over us, offering remedies and expressing her disappointment. It felt like a betrayal, a lie that tasted bitter on my tongue. As we drove away, the familiar silhouette of Grandma's house shrinking in the rearview mirror, a heavy silence settled between us. The comforting warmth of family had been replaced by a chilling realization. Our lives, our families, were intertwined with a dark, unspeakable past. The days that followed were a blur of hushed conversations, frantic research, and a desperate search for answers. Liam revisited his therapist, armed with the photo and his newly vivid memories. Together, they began to unravel the tangled threads of his childhood trauma. I, too, started digging. I spoke to my mother, subtly probing for details about Grandpa Arthur's past, his military service, his friends. She spoke of him with reverence, of his quiet strength and his unwavering kindness. There was no hint of a darker side, no whisper of violence. But the more I looked, the more I found small, unsettling inconsistencies. A gap in his military records that my mother attributed to classified missions. A period of time before he met Grandma, when he was traveling abroad and rarely spoke of it. Liam's therapist, after several intense sessions, confirmed his conviction. The details, the specific mannerisms, the chilling smile, they were too precise, too consistent with the fragmented memories he had suppressed for decades. The man in the photo was indeed the man who had been present during the massacre of his family. The realization was a crushing blow. My grandfather, a man I had only known through stories and faded photographs, was a monster. The man who had held my mother as a child, who had built this very house, was capable of unimaginable cruelty. The hardest part was the silence. We couldn't tell my family. How could we? How could we shatter their perception of Grandpa Arthur, of their own history? And what would it do to Grandma? The thought of her discovering the truth about the man she loved, the man she had built a life with, was unbearable. We decided to pursue the truth quietly, discreetly. Liam contacted a private investigator, a former police detective, who agreed to look into the cold case of his family's murder. The investigator, intrigued by Liam's story and the new lead, began to re-examine old files, interview retired officers, and dig into the past of Arthur Sterling. The investigation was slow, painstaking. Every new piece of information was a double-edged sword, bringing us closer to the truth, but also deepening the horror. We learned that Grandpa Arthur had indeed been involved in a covert military operation during the war, an operation that had left him deeply scarred, and according to a few obscure and unconfirmed reports, had involved acts of extreme violence. He had been discharged under mysterious circumstances, not as a hero, but with a quiet, almost secret, exit. The most chilling discovery came months later. The private investigator found a forgotten police report from a neighboring town, filed just weeks before Liam's family was murdered. It detailed a similar home invasion, a family brutally murdered, with no signs of forced entry and no clear motive. The description of a quiet, unassuming man with piercing eyes seen leaving the scene matched Grandpa Arthur's description uncannily. The cases had never been linked. The evidence was circumstantial but damning. The pattern, the timing, the lack of motive, the specific details Liam remembered. It all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. My grandfather, Arthur Sterling, was a serial killer, a monster who had hidden behind a facade of respectability and kindness for decades. The weight of this secret was immense. It hung between Liam and me, a dark cloud that threatened to consume us. Our relationship, once so open and trusting, was now shadowed by this shared burden. We loved each other, but how do you move forward when your families are connected by such a horrific truth? The family reunions at Grandma's house continued, but we never went back. We always found an excuse, a prior engagement, a sudden illness. My mother worried. Grandma Eleanor expressed her sadness, but we couldn't bring ourselves to step foot in that house again, not with the ghost of a killer lurking in the shadows, his faded image still hanging on the wall, a silent testament to the unspeakable evil that had touched our lives. Liam was still haunted by the nightmares, but now at least he had a name, a face, a terrifying explanation for the trauma that had shaped his entire life. And I, his wife, was left grappling with the horrifying legacy of my own family, forever changed by the day a seemingly ordinary family reunion unveiled a monstrous truth. The apple pie still smelled sweet, the laughter still echoed, but for us, the innocence of Grandma's house was forever shattered, replaced by the chilling realization that some secrets, no matter how deeply buried, always find a way to surface.